Education First will have a lot of work debuting new equipment in 2026. Not only the switch from Rafa to ASOS, but also the change from Shimano full speed ahead bar to SRAM. But above all, they're going to have a new racing weapon, this Super Six Evo from Cannondale, which is being released today, and it brings us several questions. The first question is, will it be able to measure up to the rest of the bikes in the professional peloton? And even more importantly, will it be able to go head to head to the one that everyone says is the benchmark when it comes to versatile racing road bikes, which is the Tarmac Super Light 8 from Specialized? Well, I've ridden over 1,000 kilometers testing this missile, and I'm here to answer all those questions and many more. So let's get going and check out the review. Let's see what's new with this Super Six Evo, because the real challenge is there, refining something that was already very mature. In fact, at first glance it seems like not much has changed in this new model, but before anything else, a little bit of context. It's clear that Cannondale is one of the big brands that definitely goes for a single platform as their competition road bike. Let's say it's in line with the strategy that Specialized is following with the Tarmac Superlight 8 or Trek with the 8th generation of the Madonna, and setting itself apart, way apart from the two-pronged strategy that other brands like Colnago, BMC or Scott follow, where it's very clear that they have a climbing or all-rounder model and on the other hand a completely aero model. This forces the brand's engineers to be even more excellent in their work, because a single bike has to cover as much ground as possible. Does the new Super Six Evo achieve this? Well, let's answer that question. Cannondale engineers said the previous model's handling was nearly impossible to improve, so they have focused on two areas to increase the potential of this bike: aerodynamics and weight. If we talk about aerodynamics, it's hard to tell the difference, maybe in photos, but when you're up close it's clear that there's been work done to shape certain areas of the bike. Fork, frame, handlebar, aero, which I'll give you more details about later, because there are a lot of new features in this part of the bike. But basically when you get closer you see how the head tube is much narrower and how the tubes are flatter. The integration of these bottle cages and aero bottles is to try to keep the airflow that the front wheel breaks and the down tube smooth and uninterrupted throughout this whole section. And what about the obsession with hiding the rear wheel behind the seat tube? It makes it clear that the engineers have had a lot of freedom to try to make this bike cut through the air as sharply as possible. Riding on the bike, on the flat, in the aero position. It's easy to feel that once the bike gets going, it requires very few watts to stay above 35 km per hour. The high profile wheels help enhance the whole setup, but I'll talk to you about this in more detail later on. On flat terrain, I can't notice any difference from a pure aero bike like the Canyon Aero Road, for example. As an example, you have one of the first sessions I did with this bike back in December, where on a 66 km route, it was very easy for me to maintain an average speed of 34 km, which is pretty crazy for a cyclist at my level. Of course, on Strava, you end up with an average speed of 33.7 km/h. The traffic lights are to blame when entering the city after training, but that's how it is. At an average power of 207 watts, which isn't a huge effort for me, it's clear that the bike is extremely fast on the flat. As for the weights, I think there's good news here because these are very competitive weights for a versatile bike like this. But the most interesting thing of all is that the weights are quite competitive across almost all categories, all the models. To clarify, Cannondale will offer 3 types of carbon. Obviously the lightest one is found in the Lab 71 range, which is the highest, the top of the line, the most elite, also in terms of price. But anyway, you'll see in this table the weights for the different frames, always in size 56 with the paint already applied and all the bolts. So these are completely real weights. And then there's the translation to what would be the complete stock build of each of the bikes, where, well, you can check, each of you will see different categories: S, L, Aero. I'll explain in a moment, but just so you get an idea, this model I have here, which is the Evo one in its Aero version, so the heaviest version, size 54, just as you see it assembled here, even with the bike computer mount, with the bottle cages, with the liquid power meter, tubeless, without pedals. Of course, everyone can put on their own. Put on the scale is just under 7 kilos, 400 grams. This weight translates into a very good climbing ability, though I wouldn't say it's as excellent as a pure climber like a giant total compact road. Let's say, for example, if the total compact road is a 10 at climbing, this new Cannondale is a 9, but without a doubt is way above what a pure aero bike is. I want to highlight how responsive the rear of the bike is when you get out of the saddle to accelerate. It just craves more power. Some aero bikes have a rear that feels sluggish. Something I found really positive is that this new range of Super Six Evo comes with some very thorough work from the product manager. To be able to offer the same frame and fork, the same frame kit with two different versions, one aero and the other a climber or super lightweight, it's definitely something I applaud, because it gives the end consumer the option to adapt the bike much more to their needs. It's something that's restricted only to the two highest end models, but as I said, I applaud the initiative. Both in the LAB71 models and in the Evo one you can choose between aero or super light specifications. This means that the super light specifications will feature a super lightweight carbon cockpit weighing just 265 grams, 38mm climbing wheels from T-Swiss and SRAM Red AXS group sets, in the case of the LAB71. Meanwhile, the Evo 1 super light version will feature the same lightweight cockpit, Shimano Ultegra D2 group set and reserve wheels, with a 34mm profile in the front and 37 in the rear. On the other hand, the Aero LAB71 versions feature an aero cockpit weighing 375 grams, reserve wheels with a 57mm profile in the front and 64mm in the rear, and a Shimano Dura Ace Die 2 group set. Meanwhile, on the Evo, you have exactly this model that I'm testing with aero with a Force AXS group set and the same wheels, reserve surf.
Subscribe to the channel.
Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel.
Let's move on to the bike's details. May I follow my list? There are many points and I don't want to make a mistake. To start, 32mm of tire clearance, maximum for tires both front and rear, Birmingham small arms, 68mm bottom bracket titanium bolts for the saddle. In the Lab 71 and Evo 1 models, the introduction of a new size 52, which wasn't available in the previous model, as it went from 51 to 54. Directly, there were people who were left in the middle, in no man's land. So now you're going to have 50, 52 and 54, many more options, of course, sizes below and sizes above. All Lab 71 and Evo 1 models will come with a power meter as standard. In the case of SRAM drivetrains, of course, the power meter will be a quark, and in the case of Shimano drivetrains, the power meter will be a 4-3. All Evo 2 models and below don't come with a cockpit, but instead come with a 2-piece handlebar and stem. And for those that come with the aero handlebar, you should know that there is the possibility to choose between different sizes, for example widths, in the case of the aero, from 34 to 38 centimeters with a 40mm flare. That gives us the option to use, for example, a handlebar like the one I'm using now, 38mm wide at the top and 42 at the bottom. This way, you ensure maximum aerodynamics when you're riding on the top part and really good handling when you need to grab the lower part of the handlebar. And on the other hand, there's the super light version of the cockpit, which comes with slightly wider measurements, because we can choose between 38 and 40 centimeters on the top part, always keeping the 40 millimeters of flare difference in width with the lower part. And both cockpits will always come with different stem lengths, so you can fit perfectly to the bike. What's your favorite section? Pros and cons? Alright, I'm going to follow the list. I've got a few things to point out here. To start with pros. It's a really super versatile bike. For those who are looking for a single platform to do everything in the best possible way, this is a weapon to really keep in mind. Definitely worth considering. Second, I see that this bike has an incredible handling capability, and I say this having tested a model that's set up with the aero configuration. With these wheels, with such deep rims that they could be tricky in corners, and I'm telling you that even with such deep rims, this bike is easy to handle in corners. And it's one of those bikes that makes you want to specifically go right down narrow roads with lots of curves and so on, because you really enjoy it, which honestly I hadn't experienced before with such deep rims. So the bike maintains the exceptional handling of the previous model. On the other hand, the possibility of choosing, at least in the two highest ranges, between two different versions, the super light and the aero, I've already told you that for me, that's a big plus. I think it's something that other brands should do more often, at least in stock builds. Then we have the weight, which is really well achieved considering the stiffness of the whole set and the responsiveness of the rear triangle. I really liked it, because when you stand up, the bike just wants to go. It's not a bike that makes you think it's going to be hard to move when you get up, especially when the slope percentage is above 10%. Now then, let's talk about the cons. The first one, there are few paint options in the catalogue, not much variety, so in that sense it's an area that could be improved. On the other hand, the choice of tyres. It's true that they're very fast tires, but they're very fast tires. If the road is perfect and if the road is straight, the bike stays in this position. Personally, I think Vittoria tires are not the most versatile ones out there, and well, at the end of the day, they're a consumable. You put as many miles on them as you need when you first use them, and if you don't like them, you change them. But for me, as stock equipment, that's something I would improve. And finally, there's one downside that I think is relevant. Just as I applauded the fact that there are two build options for the two highest ranges, the super light and the aero, I think that this option, specifically the aero version of the Evo one, has a small inconsistency, and I think that the target audience who will look for this bike with this aero concept will probably find that this SRAM drivetrain with a 48 tooth big chainring fall short in the end. It's a bike, as I mentioned before, that's very easy to get up to 35 kilometers per hour, and there, even if you shift to the 10 tooth cog, the 48 tooth chainring, if you're even a little bit fit, if you're someone who's prepared, if you're someone who might be competing, it's very likely that the 48 tooth chainring will feel too small for you. This isn't a problem with Canon, it's an issue with the specifications of all the brands that come with the SRAM 48 tooth chainring as standard. But I've considered that this model, like the Aerolab 71, comes with the Shimano 52 tooth chainring, which makes more sense to me. This 48, in my opinion, is too small. And finally, a warning, this isn't a pro or a con, but I want you to keep it in mind, because people see the aero specs with these wheels, with these huge profiles. 57 millimeters in the front, 64 in the back, that's much more than the current standard of 45 or even 50 front and back. And when people see this because of the aesthetics, they go straight for it. I want to give you the reflection and the warning that this type of wheels in the hands of someone, a cyclist who is not fully experienced, who doesn't have much experience with them, might not have the best experience. On a very windy day or on a road with lots of curves, but especially on a very windy day, I'm telling you, so you keep it in mind. The super light version might not look as flashy, but it's also a very good option. So answering the question we raised at the beginning, is this bike better than a Tarmac Superlight 8? Can it compete with the rest of the professional peloton? I really think it has nothing to envy from any other bike we can find today in the professional peloton. In fact, I think that by 2026 is going to be one of the benchmarks when it comes to all-round bikes, if we understand versatility by that new development. In terms of frame construction techniques that we've seen in the last 3 years, more or less, they've really allowed for a much better development of the entire internal part of the fork frame and achieve what brands always tell us, which seems almost impossible: less weight, more stiffness, and also more responsiveness. Here it's clear as soon as you put it on the scale and as soon as you get on the bike. So can it really compete with any other? With the Superlight 8, I think they can sit at the same table. They're really very evenly matched bikes. If we're going to look for the subtle differences, in my experience, I'd say the Superlight 8, the Tarmac. I get the feeling that it's a bike that's a bit more suited for climbing and that this Cannondale is a bit more aero. But we're talking about tiny differences in two bikes that are very similar. I don't know what you think. Please let me know here in the comments. What score would you give this amazing new Cannondale Super Six Evo from 1 to 10? Share the video with your cyclist friends, like it, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next videos. Stay happy. Bye.